Today I'm really excited to share with you a captions and audio playlist. And all you do is press this green button. It says Caption 1. Then there's a red button that turns green when it's ready to go for the next one. I'd like to first and foremost simply just give this away. So anybody who wants a copy, please just ask and I'll add you as a collaborator so you can import it into your world. And so because of that, I want to first start by introducing the concept and how it works and how to utilize it. So the first thing you need to note is we have 4 audio blocks. So if I was to come into my world, I would open up my Gizmos tab and bring out a sound recorder. Now in my sound recorder, I'm going to attach the script Captions on Audio Block. In the Captions on Audio block, I will first recommend you scroll down and change the distance, and we're going to change this down to 25. So it's relatively far, but not super duper far. And then from here, we can just simply hit record. This is a quick test audio recording. I can see the length of my audio recording here, and I want to notate that when I'm done. So I'm going to hit stop, and we saw that that was 7 seconds. So here under length, I will type in 7 seconds, and this time here determines when the button turns green. Then I can see that we have 2 of these underscores. Anything that's underscores you're not supposed to utilize. These ones, line 1 and 2, that determines the lines on your captions. So if I play this back, this is and so I can quickly type in the 2 caption lines here on line 1 and 2. And when we get into the script, I'm going to show you how you can quickly add additional lines. So you could even have 4 lines of captions. Although I do recommend keeping it shorter so you can have it more interactive for the players. So now that we've got this caption set up, we could set up multiple captions, and in this current setup, you can do 4 captions, but I'm going to also show you in the scripting portion of this video how we can extend the captions to have as many audio blocks as you want. I mean, probably there's a limit, but we're going to have to figure it out at some point, right? So at this point, you can just go crazy with this. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull out a trigger. The trigger is the brains of this, so we're going to need this trigger, and we're going to attach audio playlist. And so under audio playlist, you'll note that we have spaces for audio 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have a text object and we have a button. If you don't use a button, that's fine. It just won't color a button. So right now it's designed to color a button, so there's a visual indicator of when the next caption is ready. So now let's go ahead and bring in a quick shape object. You don't even need to color this object, so we'll just keep it white. And then we're also going to bring in a text gizmo. And now that we have all of these objects, we just need to grab the reference cable and connect them. And then we'll go to our audio and grab the reference cable here and bring that into audio 1. There we go. So now this is all set up correct, but the next thing I would recommend is going into your text object, pressing in here, and then pressing enter. Your text object saves the length, so that way you get the size right and you can move it around and know exactly how big it is when you're moving around that text block. Now that we have it all set up correctly, we'll close out of everything. We're going to connect our trigger onto here. We're going to move our audio block right in front of the trigger. So we're going to need to grab our text object. I do recommend keeping it relatively close to where you want to use it. And then we can grab the paint tool and paint it black. Now that we've done that, the other problem we were having was the rotation was like this. Our object is moving the position of the text object, not the rotation. So you do want to have the position aligned the way you want it. So if you want it to be like this, you can align your text to be like that. If you want it to be flat like that or up like this. So I'm just going to leave it flat like that. In fact, I'm even going to use our snap tools and mark it right here so it's already in position. There we go. So now everything is nicely aligned. I come in as a player, press the button. This is a quick test audio recording. That is how simple it is to get set up. If you have any questions about that, don't hesitate to ask. I'd like to dive right into the script because it's not very difficult, and if you want to modify it, it's super easy to do. So we're going to start by talking about modifications. The first thing to note is when world is started, we have a complete string variable. To add to this complete string, there's 2 methods you can do this. You can just continue adding plus symbols into this side here. So you remember you use your set command to get this, and then we can bring our complete string into here. So I've made a duplicate copy of this because when you set a string, it saves its current value. So what you could also do is continue adding to it using the plus symbol and then simply putting complete string here. I'd recommend bringing in another plus symbol and then On our variable side, you're going to notice we have this break symbol. This is a double break, and to get a break, you use the less than symbol, the BR, and then a greater than symbol, and now I've made it a triple break, which I don't want, so I'm going to delete that. 1, 2, 3, and 4. There we go. So we're going to take our break, and what break is going to do is it's going to add a line break between line 2, and then we can quickly add line variable, and we'll go and make this a string variable and call this line 3. There we go. So now we have line 3, which we can just drop in here, and now it's a 3-line string, and you could simply keep duplicating this and just keep creating new string variables, and now inside of the properties panel of your object, you can add an additional line. For instance, this script here was really long. Like, this would have been much better on 3 lines. So now if I open up the audio properties, you can see there's a 3rd line, and now I could delete that out, or half of it at least, and put that down on the 3rd line. If you're getting a copy of this, it's coming with 4 lines. Super exciting, and you're welcome. Now let's talk about the audio playlist. How do we get additional sounds? Well, we have an audio list. This is a list of objects, and at the beginning of the world, we add audio 1, 2, 3, and 4 to the audio list. So if we wanted to add another audio block, you click New Variable, drop down, Object, and we'll call this audio 5. And now we've got another audio slot, and we come over here, grab this. I recommend duplicating. It can be kind of difficult to get in the right position, but if you press to the right on the joystick, you'll get a duplicate copy. And now we can drop in audio 5 right there, and now it's added audio 5 to the list, and now we have 5 audio objects. Now the thing to note here is that where do you find this add to list? If you have trouble with your duplicate tool, you want to scroll to the bottom of the operators tab, and you'll see add to list. By pulling add to list over, we need to add a value and the list. So we know the audio list is this variable, so we put that in the right side. And then on the left side, we'll click new variable, and there we have it. This has now been upgraded to have 6 object audio blocks. Let's keep going. Let's talk about how these scripts work, because they're relatively simple scripts, and if you wanted to make this yourself or augment it or change it, it's not too difficult to do. When world is started, we create the caption. We call this caption complete string, and it's simply adding the lines of text together with breaks in between. These are string variables. Then we continue adding to that string as we just discussed. Then when event getString with an object ID is received, and you might be asking, where does this event come from? Well, it's actually coming from our audio command block. So remember, all of our audio blocks are tied into that playlist. We can send an event to that audio block called getString. And so when we send an event from our audio playlist trigger, we are sending it with the self variable, and that's an object ID. So we receive getString with an object ID, so that way we can send myStringIs to the object ID with our complete string. So we drag object ID down to the entity. Normally this would say self, but this allows you to send an event back to our audio playlist, and we send it with the parameter complete string. So you just simply drag this over into the parameter block, and then send event myLengthIs to the object ID with length. And so this is simply dragging over our length variable, and now the audio playlist will know how long it is. And then on our audio playlist side is also very simple. At the beginning of the world, we add all 6 audio blocks to the playlist, and they're added in this order. We then display a string on the text object. This keeps it kind of cleared out until the text comes in. We color our button to be green. So this is RGB, red, green, blue. So I knew one would be green. So I just kept it super simple. And then when the trigger is entered with the player is received, if 1 at a time is true, because we only want this to run 1 at a time, we've created a Boolean variable that's initially set to true. And so when it comes through, it says, if this is true 1 at a time, then we run our command. And then almost immediately we're setting 1 at a time to be false. That way it only goes off 1 time. Then we stop the sound on the get item iteration from audio list. So you might be wondering, what is this? Well, when you have a playlist, if you scroll to the bottom of your operators tab, you have get item from list. So what we needed to do is find out what is the first item in the list, so that we have an iteration variable. And what an iteration variable is it's a number in motion that starts at 0 and it iterates up 1 number at a time going through the entire list, and when it gets to the end, we set it back to 0 to restart. So when it gets that first sound from the list, we stop it initially just in case it was already playing. This prevents any issues. There's a bit of a bug on audio recordings that can cause it not to play unless it's stopped first. Then we set 1 at a time to be false, like I just mentioned, and then we send event getString to that same object that we got from the list with self as a parameter. That way it knows who to send it back to. We then set position in motion to be the position of that same item. And then we color the button to be red. So red is the first value, so we set that to be 1 and we set green to be 0, and this changes it from green to red. And then finally, we play that sound from the list. After doing all of that, we set iteration to increase by 1, so we use the set command, which can be found under the values tab at the top. So we use set2, and then we use the plus symbol, which is found at the top of the operators tab right here. And when we add 1 to the current value, that increments it from 0 to 1, then from 1 to 2, and eventually it'll hit the length of the audio list. So if you go to the bottom of your operators tab, you'll get length of list, and this allows us to say when iteration is greater than or equal to the length of the audio list, set the iteration to be 0. So this resets it back to the beginning, so it'll start over. But remember, we just sent an event to our audio block, and so we've just received my string is and my length is. And so what we're going to do is we're going to first start by moving to that position in motion on the text object. So remember, up here we set the position in motion, which is a vector variable that we are constantly changing to update to the current position of the current audio block. And now if you didn't want this to be a position in motion, you could set it to be a static object, or you could even have an object on your robot or your character. So your character could be moving around and then it could move to that position. But please note, if you do have a moving character, you're going to need to have it pause for a moment while it's reading the caption. So then we move to that position on our text object. And so this is the position of our audio block is how it's currently set up. And then we display the caption on the text object. So now we've displayed this caption on our text object, and the display is found under Actions tab right here for text. And then when my length comes through, which is almost immediately, we send event enable next to self after length of seconds. So all this is going to do is it's going to enable the next audio block to be played. So that length is used for our seconds, and then enable next is received after that many seconds. And at that point, we color it back to green on the button, and we set 1 at a time to be true, more or less re-enabling the trigger so it can be used again. Which is actually a good point. You probably could have pulled this off using the enable and disable, which is also found under the Actions tab. Enable object and disable object allows you to enable and disable a trigger, but I like having access to the events. So this is my preferred method, is just to use a Boolean variable, so I have more control. Just a quick afterthought here, if you don't have 6 audio blocks to link in, you're gonna need to delete these add to audio lists, because having them will actually prevent this from working. So I'm gonna delete these 2, because it is causing my robot not to work and I wasn't using those, but it's very easy to add back in. Don't be afraid to start messing with the script. And if you make an error, it's really easy to import this back into another world. I have to give a huge shout out to Flutterby. This was really huge props to her. She had this idea and I was so happy to work with her just the other day in creating this. And now we've updated it to become even better. So very excited to share this with you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye! Bye!